Welcome to Taking Stock. Sometimes you can feel totally helpless in a situation, utterly bereft of choice, entirely through your own stupidity. It's those times which you remember, and sometimes it's your reaction to circumstances like that which become the stuff of family legend. In our family, you can sometimes tell what kind of adventure is going to become one of the family legends, even when you're in the middle of it. And you know which words are going to trigger the story. Any one of my children, for example, will launch into a particularly funny story about me. Well, they thought it was funny at the time, I'm still not so sure, just by mentioning the words Farmer Giles. The one we all remember, though, is visiting Uncle Roger. My late brother-in-law and his family lived in Yorkshire, which means that from where we lived at the time that this legend was born, in order to visit them we travelled up the M1 and then joined the M62 Trans-Pennine motorway briefly. Not that we needed to traverse the Pennines, of course, we didn't need to go anywhere near Lancashire, but then again, who does? But when has that ever stopped us? Thing is, we'd never been there before. Well, we'd been to Yorkshire, but we'd never been to Roger's house, and so we were map reading. Well, I say we, I really mean Janet was map reading. I was driving. If I've got one fault when I'm driving, and I've got a few, I suppose, it's that I will always do what Janet tells me to do, even if I know it's wrong for some reason. If she's map reading and says turn right, if I know it should be turn left, she turns right, I still turn left. I don't know why. I just have this fault. I'll do whatever she says in the car when I'm driving. So on this particular occasion, we're hammering down the M62 towards Lancashire, and heading towards junction 23, and Janet says, there's something here about junction 23. What? I say, what about junction 23? I'm not quite sure, I can't read my own writing. Because of course it'd been written on the back of an envelope. While she was chasing the envelope round the top of the television, I was holding the phone in the other hand. Well, we're heading towards Lancashire at 70 miles an hour. What about junction 23? I don't know. So I whiz past junction 23 just as she says, no, make sure you take 23, she says, because you can't get off the motorway in this direction at junction 24. Then we discover that the only way we can get to turn around is to go right over the Pennines all the way to Saddleworth, almost as far as Oldham, to turn around and come back again, adding an hour to our journey. Well, you can imagine the arguments that took place all the way from Yorkshire into Lancashire, all the way around the roundabout, or whatever, the junction at the other end in Oldham / Saddleworth, and all the way back again, yelling and screaming at each other whose idea it was. My children insist that it was one of the funniest spectacles I'd ever seen. But we were arguing so much about it, and I was so determined that she should take the blame for what was clearly her error, that when we came off the junction at 24 again and went round the roundabout, I took the wrong turn off the roundabout, and before I realised it, was heading down the slipway and back onto the M62 again, heading for Lancashire. So I added another whole hour to our journey, because I was too determined to argue. Now, my children also say that at this point I opened the window and let out what you might call a primal scream of rage at 75 miles per hour, crossing Saddleworth Moor. That might be true. It may not be true, but it's certainly become the stuff of legend. Because in the end, though we argued, and though we shouted, and though we were cross, the only real response was to laugh. So we ended laughing at each other and with each other for adding 2 hours to our journey for the sake of a piece of scrawled paper and a determination not to do what I was told. Family legends, but something to laugh at. Now, I believe that God laughs. I believe in a God who believes in humour. I believe in a Jesus who told jokes. His camel ones were the best ones, but I guess you really had to be there. The God I believe in loves laughter. Because laughter sweeps the soul clean of the dust and the dirt and the degradation of life. So I want to ask a question of those who see religion as grey and solemn. I'm sure most people can picture God weeping, you see, because we know that Jesus, God's human reflection, wept with the sad and the lonely and the lost. But Jesus laughed too. So do you think God laughs? Do you think he enjoys music, or do you think he watches a cup final every year and enjoys it? Well, apart from when Man United or Arsenal are playing, of course. Now, I ask that from a philosophical point of view, because it seems to me that God couldn't possibly be God if he couldn't laugh or enjoy music or sport. I mean, how can God make creatures that can do things he can't do? Call me naive, if you like. My philosophy tutor used to call me much worse than that, but he had a much better vocabulary. But if it seems to me that if God could make creatures capable of doing things of which he was incapable, then he'd be less powerful than his creation. Ergo, he wouldn't be God anymore. Now, I realise this might put us on a bit of sticky wicket vis-a-vis sin, since all theologians down the ages insist that God is incapable of sin, and human beings manifestly are not. But you can't have everything, as the bankrupt said to the tax collector. If I had to choose between a God who couldn't sin and a God who couldn't laugh, I'd definitely vote to retain laughter. If not, I think it would be a pretty grim old universe that we ended up in. On balance, though, I think I'd rather have a God who could sin if he wanted to, but insists on laughing instead. Especially if he's watching Arsenal lose at the time. And then there's music. What about music? What's it for, if it was not created just for the purpose of scaling the heights and plumbing the depths of human emotion? Surely God takes pleasure in music. They say that when the angels in heaven want to please God, they play Bach, and when they want to please themselves, they play Mozart, and God eavesdrops. And how could you believe that any being lacked a sense of humour who could create the duck-billed platypus? Or for that matter, Wolverhampton Wanderers. Laughter and music and sport are the most apparently useless and pointless activities in the gamut of human endeavour. Yet in my view, they are three of God's greatest gifts to us. And in many ways, they are what separate us from the animals. Geneticists and determinists might try to explain away sport as the vestiges of our simian past, making us practice for fight or flight, but they can't explain music or laughter that way. They certainly can't explain why it should be that as I write a sermon or a poem or a book, I have to be listening to the first movement of Mozart's Concerto for Flute and Orchestra in G major. And then my fingers fly over the keys. My heart is light and my spirit lifted by glorious music written 200 years before I was born. From the point of view of doer determinism, music's useless, but it makes us happy or sad or whatever emotion you care to name. It has the ability to express whatever we want to express, to share what we feel without the interference of the spoken word. Isn't that glorious? Isn't that a gift? No other animal makes instruments to make music, so it can hardly be genetically necessary to the survival of a species, as is, say, the opposable thumb. But to my mind, music is essential to our survival as human beings. Well, it's certainly essential to mine, and I think it, with laughter, has done more to raise humanity above the level of animals than almost any other human quality. As to laughter, what other animal laughs? None that I know of. Fair enough, animals, particularly domestic animals, can be playful, can do things just for the sake of it, for fun if you like, with no apparent point. Why else do my puppies dig up flaming great holes in my lawn at every opportunity? But no animal understands a joke, at least not one of my jokes. No animal can hear a comment on the condition of its species and put back its head and roar with laughter, as can a human being. What gives a lift to the spirit more than a really good laugh? I just love jokes and funny stories, especially religious ones which deflate the egos and poke fun at the po-faced. I have an infallible test as to whether I'm going to get on with someone, and that's to put on a DVD of Rowan Atkinson in his one-man show doing the sketch called Welcome to Hell. If whoever is listening to it for the first time doesn't laugh, then I quietly show them the door. We're never going to get on. A second test would be a joke, well, like the following one. If they don't laugh at this, if you don't laugh at this, then you and they are definitely out of the door. Because it's a joke which encompasses religion, It features Jesus, and it also features the game, the sublime game, the way of spoiling a good walk game that we call golf. Now, you have to know a little bit about golf before I tell the story. Just so you know, the par is the amount of strokes, shots, you might say, that you're expected to finish a hole of golf in. And the shortest hole on any golf course anywhere in the world will be a par 3. So it's quite an easy one. To slice a shot means, if you're right-handed, to hit it in such a way as you think it's going straight and then it veers over sharply to the right in a kind of banana bend. So that's all you need to know about this joke. Now you know that, I defy you not to laugh. Anyway, the joke goes like this. Jesus is playing golf with Simon Peter. They get to the first tee and toss a coin to see who's to play first, and Jesus, naturally enough, wins the toss. He puts his ball down on the tee peg, addresses the ball as he gets ready to shoot, and hits the ball as hard as he can. He hits the ball and he slices it terribly. It flies off towards some deep and thick woodland. And as it flies through the air towards the woodland, an owl flies out of the trees in the middle of the day, grabs the golf ball in mid-air with its talons, flies over the green and drops the ball on the green. And just as the owl drops the ball on the green and flies off, a rabbit runs out from the side of the green, picks up the ball in its long teeth, runs up to the hole and drops it in the hole before running off. Peter looks at Jesus. Jesus looks at Peter and shrugs. And then he looks up into the heavens and says, "Leave it out, Dad. I'm playing for money." Now, I think that's gloriously funny. I think that reminds us that God loves laughter and doesn't like cheating. I think it reminds us that there are parts of our lives which, if we didn't laugh at, we'd have to cry. And though God would cry with us, does cry with us when weeping is the only response, well, he's there too when we laugh and lift our spirits. Stay safe, people.